I decided to go on a hike this morning, and as I was just walking around, I was reflecting on embarrassing moments. And maybe you've had one in your life, I'm sure you have, and that's what I want you to think on for a moment. Think about the most embarrassing time in your life, whether you said something or you did something, whether that was in private or in a group of people, and remember that feeling that you had. And one of those feelings that I had was when I was in high school, and I hate admitting this, but we had an assignment where we had to get up in front of the class and read a little excerpt from a book. And my name was called, and I nervously get up in front of everybody, in front of the whole entire class, and I'm reading, and people are listening to what I'm saying. And you know this moment where you're trying to read and you're not trying to sound like a big dummy. Well, I sounded like a dummy because I came across a word that I just, for a moment, freaked out and couldn't figure out how to pronounce. It started with a K, it ended with a K. I'm trying to read it. I think it starts says Kai or K or K, and then there's an A in there, and I'm trying to figure out how to say it. And I remember in my embarrassment in front of a whole entire crowd, the kid in the front of the row looks down at what I'm trying to read and says in front of everybody, "Are you trying to say the word kayak?" And I remember the whole room erupted in laughter, and I felt extremely embarrassed. And I still think about that moment today. Even though it's so silly and it's so dumb, there was a moment where I was filled with embarrassment. And what's interesting about embarrassment is that we've all experienced embarrassing moments in our life, but yet we feel like we're the only people who have had embarrassing moments. We don't tell other people about the embarrassing moments because we're nervous on what they're going to say. Embarrassment is interesting because it's the very thing that secludes us from everybody else. We make a mistake and we're embarrassed because nobody else has made that mistake. And we feel this sense of shame that comes with the embarrassment of what we've done wrong or mispronounced or said in front of a group of people or in private. And today we're going to look at a story in the Bible where a woman was dealt with embarrassment, and I want for us to look at how Jesus responded to this woman in this situation. But before we jump into this story, I want to give you some context to the story. And this is showcasing Jesus walking around and teaching the message of God and loving other people in his community. He's pulling them in and he's creating common ground. And he finds himself in a temple preaching a message. And the Pharisees and religious leaders don't like this because they wanted to be kind of separated from society. They wanted to have this elevated status separate from everybody else. And Jesus was creating the common ground that they didn't like. And so they started to challenge what he was saying, and they started to ask him questions and create riddles and scenarios to see if he could stumble while solving them. But like always, Jesus does something miraculous, and he showcases compassion and love and ends up proving that he is the Son of God in every sense. So you could imagine how embarrassed and frustrated the Pharisees are in this situation. And so this is where it leads off in the story that we're about to read, where they do something quite literally over the top. In John 8:1 through 11, we read this, that Jesus returned to the Mount of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd ensued and gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery, and they put her in front of the crowd. I want you to think about how embarrassing this is for a woman, where a bunch of men catch her in the act of adultery, they break into her house, they drag her through the streets naked, and everybody is watching. Everybody knows what's happening, and they are making the biggest commotion. And to top it off, they then grab her and throw her in front of Jesus, the Son of God, on the ground in front of everyone. And here is how Jesus responds. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her, but what do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with this woman. The moment that this woman was brought to Jesus, he noticed her in a crowded room. He paid attention to her and he defended her. because Jesus not only loved her, but he was willing to defend and protect her. And I love this because Jesus goes on in the story. It says, then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said to her, neither do I. Go and sin no more. In a lot of ways, we're like this woman. We have done things that we shouldn't have done, and we're filled with embarrassment and regret in those moments. And instead of God making us feel secluded from the rest, he cares for us, he loves us, he defends us because Jesus is for us. Imagine what life would look like if we could be more like Jesus with the people around us. Imagine if we were able to notice people in a crowded room and invite them into the conversation, invite them into our friend group, let them become a part of our family. What would it look like if we were able to go into school and go into work and love and care for the people around us and let them know that we are for them? What would it look like if we were able to showcase the love of Jesus to the very people that are in our neighborhood, that are in our community, that are in our school, that are in our work? What if we could defend them? What if we could love them? And what if we could be for the people the way that Jesus is for us every single day? I want to challenge you with this question. What would it look like if you could live the way that Jesus lived and be for the people?